Hey everyone, my name is Jennifer Woods, and today I'll be discussing a TV movie called Someone She Knows, which came out in 1994, stars Markie Post, Gerald McRaney, Jeffrey Nordling, and an actress named Sharon Lawrence, who you might remember as the biological mother in The Face in the Milk Carton. She played Janie's mother, and she looks a little bit like a young Susan Sarandon, maybe a little bit like Ashley Judd, but she's a different person, honest. So today I'll be discussing Someone She Knows, and the next week I'll be discussing Vanished Without a Trace, 1999, starring Shelley Long. It's very similar in plot line to Someone She Knows, and for the month of June I'd like to do that. Cover one movie one week, and then the following week cover a movie that's similar in plot so we can kind of compare and contrast. I think that would be fun. And if it works this month, I'll carry it on until July, and so on. Because as you know, there are a lot of very similar plots in TV movie land. And even if it's not a TV movie, if it's a movie, chances are it's a retread of an earlier plot. But today I'll be discussing Someone She Knows, so let's begin. Someone She Knows came out in 1994. I've read online that it's loosely based on the murder of a little girl named Amanda. The movie stars Markie Post as the mother of a 6-year-old girl named Marilee, who is murdered by an unknown killer. And just a clarification, by unknown killer I mean unknown to the characters and to the viewer, up until the very end when the mother cracks the case and finds out that it was actually not a stranger who killed her daughter, but someone she knew quite well. And in case you're wondering why it's the mother that cracks the case, it's very simple. It's because the police are not doing their jobs. They're basically just sitting on their behinds, investigating the wrong people. So then it becomes the mother's job to make sure that justice is done. Before I begin, I'd just like to give a little disclaimer. Throughout this review, my tone might come across as slightly sarcastic, or maybe even a lot sarcastic, but I do not mean any disrespect to the victims of crime, and especially not to the little girl who tragically lost her life, who inspired this movie. I don't know how closely the events of the movie mirror the events in real life. I'm sure that the movie takes ample liberties with the facts, and TV movie-izes it, if that's a word. So what I'm making fun of is TV movies, not victims of crime. I just want to make sure that's clear. I have nothing but compassion for people who go through these enormous tragedies. I can't speak for them. I know it must be difficult to have their stories put out there. It must be difficult to see their stories fictionalized on the screen, and I mean them no additional trauma. If you're triggered by this subject matter, you may want to keep this in mind. This might not be the review for you. I completely understand. If you do stick around, though, I do appreciate it. The movie opens with a shot of someone sorting through photos in a little keepsake box. The photos are of very young girls, but none of them appear to be Marilee. In fact, from a distance, one of them even looks a little like a real-life murder victim named Jacqueline de Wallaby, who was the subject of a TV miniseries called Gone in the Night, starring Shannon Doherty and Kevin Dillon, back in 1996. But Someone She Knows had nothing to do with that, and I can't see the photo well enough to say for sure. I don't know what the purpose of the scene is, since if I'm right, and those little girls are not Marilee or the one other little girl who's in this movie, then the point of the scene seems to be to introduce us to characters from some other movie, and not the one that we're watching. None of the girls in the photos even look like the girl that this movie was allegedly based on, but anyways, moving on. Now we learn that the lead character, Lori, is a waitress. That means that she's probably struggling to make ends meet, because clearly nobody would be a waitress at some middle-of-nowhere diner if they had a choice. Although, she could be getting generous tips. Just not on her daughter's murder, as we will soon find out. The woman sitting at the counter asks Lori what's new. Lori says that Marilee is about to enter first grade. Could this woman be the future killer of Lori's daughter? She seems to be on a first-name basis with the kid, and she seems oddly interested in a child that doesn't belong to her. We find out that Lori's significant other, Greg, is a trucker. The two pretend not to know each other at first. He seems like a total a-hole who's come to harass this poor woman at her place of work. But not a killer because, well, they don't know each other well enough for that. But wait, this was all just some sick game they like to play. They actually do know each other quite well. They kiss before he takes off on important business. So add the trucker to the growing list of suspects. Are you keeping track? Do you need a moment to grab a pen? Lori goes to pick up her daughter from her sister's place. Her sister Sharon is played by Susan Sarandon. Oops, I mean Ashley Judd. Oops, I mean Sharon Lawrence. At first, I thought Aunt Sharon was just a term of endearment and wasn't sure the two women were actually related. I thought maybe they were just friends who lived down the road from each other. But later on, Sharon is referred to as Laurie's sister. Someone else Laurie knows, so there's another possible suspect. Apparently, Sharon is someone who will watch her niece when Laurie is too busy with other stuff. Sharon says that Marilee was an absolute pleasure, as she always is, and in case there was any doubt what an absolute sweetheart this little Marilee is, she hugs her stuffed dog named Patches. Her one flaw is that she insists on wearing her special shorts on her first day of first grade, which means her mother will have to hem them. After lunch, Marilee gets on her bike. Her mother tells her to be back in a half an hour. Oh, wait, she's back. She fell off her bike and needs her mother to patch her up and send her on her way again. She's back on her bike now. She says she'll see her mother in 30 minutes. She is never seen again. Laurie goes to pay her electric bill after realizing her no-good husband forgot to pay it and tells Sharon that if Marilee shows up at her house, just keep her there until Laurie returns home. I'm sure Laurie will regret this decision later, but she really shouldn't. Marilee's probably already been kidnapped by this point anyway, and may even be dead. She never made it to Sharon's house. So yeah, Marilee never does return home from that bike ride. The mother is in an absolute panic when she can't find her at Sharon's or at their own trailer home or at the home of the woman with all the kittens that Marilee loved. The police are now working the case, and they're searching in places where nobody would ever expect to find a living child. And yet they're not officially calling it a homicide investigation. Not yet, though they've already started to lean into that likely possibility. Laurie is friends with one of the detectives, Frank Mayfield, played by Gerald McRaney. And in case you're wondering where Frank was when Marilee went missing, he was taking his son Dwight to Little League. But good for you for picking up on the fact that everyone known to Laurie is a potential suspect. Stepfather Greg rushes home when he hears the news that Marilee is missing. It's kind of suspicious that he was able to get home so fast when he should have been miles and miles away by that point, but he says he violated the speed limit in order to make it back when he did. The searchers are waiting around in marshland. They find part of a bike wheel first, and then they find the body. Sadly, it's Marilee. Frank looks troubled by the gruesome sight. Is it because this is part of the job he doesn't actually enjoy, bringing home dead kids in a body bag? Or is he wishing he hadn't let the police search in an area where he knew she would eventually be found? If he does end up being the killer, that was a huge fail on his part. When the women back at Laurie's house see the cop cars coming toward them, they know it's a bad sign. Or maybe, being friends of Laurie and therefore potential killers, they already knew Marilee was dead all along. Laurie doesn't even need to hear the words. She rushes out and sees a detective get out of his vehicle, make a sad face, and bow his head. During the autopsy, it is determined that the little girl had bruises on her wrists. Clearly handcuffs, though nobody states the obvious. The mother is in serious mourning for the rest of the movie. Can you blame her? Her little girl is gone. All she has left is Greg, who looks like a total dillweed. No offense to the actor Jeffrey Nordling. He's tall, blonde, and fairly good-looking, and therefore clearly an operator. As we all know from TV movies, any good-looking guy has got to be hiding something. It's a fact. Don't blame the messenger. The police immediately suspect the mother and stepfather because they probably took statistics in college. I skipped out on that class, so I'm not as convinced. But the young detective heading the case, who's a complete turd by the way, gets on Laurie's case for forgetting to tell them about her trip to pay the electric bill right after she last saw Marilee. She'd initially said she'd taken a nap instead. Her daughter had just disappeared and shortly after was found murdered. She clearly wasn't thinking straight. Also, the police discover that Greg apparently has a drug record, but we later find out it was some other guy with the same name. Apparently there are other guys named Greg Phillips out there. Dumb police officers can't even do their job right. Laurie begins to suspect Greg too, before finding out the drug charge was for someone else. But back when she was still suspicious of him, she dug around in his pockets and found gas receipts that didn't show him going as far as he would have gone on the day Marilee was killed. She's like, wouldn't he have had to fill up closer to where he was going? But I just want to say, that's pretty weak. A lack of evidence is not evidence. She attempts to kill herself with pills, but Greg miraculously saves the day by bursting through the door just at the very moment she was about to swallow them. If only real life worked that perfectly. Now that Laurie has been pulled back from the edge just in the nick of time, she has a new mission, and that is to track down her daughter's killer. The cops sure as heck aren't doing anything. She enlists Frank Mayfield's help because he's her friend and a cop. He's really sticking his neck out for her. But then the younger Dillweed cop comes to Laurie's diner and accuses her of interfering with their investigation. And Laurie realizes that Frank has told on her, and she feels betrayed. Funny, that is the exact moment she begins to realize that Frank has the same color car as the one that was seen near the site where her daughter's body was found at the time of her disappearance. He's also way too close with the neighborhood kids, like this little kindergarten girl named Brandy. One of the neighborhood boys is riding a bike with a wing nut on it that was taken straight from Marilee's pink bike. Apparently Frank's son Dwight gave it to the boy. When Frank gives Brandy a ride to school one day, Laurie gets the cops to follow him. She's no longer friends with Frank, but there's some other cop she's chummy with who seems to be on her side, so she confides in him. Even still, that cop's whole approach seems to be, let's wait and see if he kills another kid. Then we'll be able to get him. Nothing we can really do after only one murder. We really need a second one in order to be able to do anything. Frank doesn't kill Brandy with a cop car on his tail, but he doesn't give up on his evil plan, even though he has to know that the second he harms a hair on the little girl's head, they'll be on him like a tick on a Girl Scout. In this scene, we also see Brandy playing with a pair of handcuffs. A hint regarding how Marilee got the bruises on her wrists. We never would have figured out Cop Frank had handcuffs in his car without it being thrown in our face, would we? Laurie tries to warn Brandy's mother, but everyone in town is against her because she's been spreading stories about their boy Frank. And also, her daughter was killed 4 months ago and she hasn't had the sense to shut up about it by now. In the end, Brandy's mother will come up to her and personally thank her for single-handedly taking down the bad guy. For now, though, she'll just slam the door in Laurie's face. How about that? Every time Brandy's brothers go off to school without her, Laurie seems to be nearby, observing the situation and asking questions. The brats tell her to buzz off. Laurie goes to Brandy's school and finds out that even though school doesn't seem to have started yet, Brandy's been marked as absent. Weird. She goes back to the trailer park and sees that Frank's car is parked nearby. She breaks into his home by finding the hide-a-key. He probably should rethink that hide-a-key in the future, especially if he plans to kidnap more children and hold them captive in his house. She finds Brandy lying on the bed. Frank is there too, and he tries to convince her that Brandy's just sick, and he's watching her for her mom. Does he think she was born yesterday? He has clearly given the kid something to knock her out. Laurie threatens him with his own gun she managed to grab from the holster just as he was about to reach for it. It's strange. This is a woman whose timing is so perfect, it's almost like the universe has her back or something. Except for that small window of time when her daughter was kidnapped and murdered. Except for when she actually would have liked the universe's assistance. So it's clear the universe isn't actually working in her favor. It's working in favor of the plot. Frank says she wouldn't dare shoot him. Fool. Never question the nerve of a dead child's mother when she's holding a gun. She injures him, but he manages to escape, just as the police arrive at the house. She'd called them a little earlier. Apparently it took them more time to arrive than it did for her to find that hide-a-key and shoot a man. They need to work on their timing. The police chase Frank out into the Arizona desert in slow motion. Frank's wife returns home at that very moment, so clearly he wouldn't have gotten very far with Brandy, even if Laurie hadn't found that hide-a-key. Gotta love a good anticlimax. Guess who else walks in at this moment? My mother. She asks me what I'm watching. Oh, some movie about a woman whose daughter was killed. A cop did it. A cop? I know. Who's ever heard of a kid being killed by a cop? Overall, I would say this was a decent movie. I'd give it 4 out of 5 stars because Gerald McRaney and Markie Post are a pleasure to watch on screen. They really bring the characters to life. They don't give Oscar-worthy performances, but Post makes you care about her ordeal, and you want to see the mystery solved as much as she does, even though the title has pretty much already given away the ending. But honestly, in a movie there is limited amount of suspects it can be, because it's probably always going to be someone who was introduced to you already, so probably someone the main character knows. That's just deductive reasoning. Stay tuned for my next episode, where I discuss Vanished Without a Trace, the 1999 Shelley Long movie about the woman with a missing daughter who goes on to solve the case without the police's help. Gee, that plotline sounds awfully familiar. Until next time, have a great day, and thanks for listening.